Africa. He is the Deputy Chief of Staff Strategy, Joint Monitoring and Evaluation Commission, JEMEC. So he is here to tell us all about the 2018 peace agreement and to give us an update. And I can see on my end that we are live and we are very happy to be here with you today. So while we are allowing everyone a couple of minutes to come on the live, I want to say, Dr. Fountain, it is a pleasure to be here with you again for another Facebook Live. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. It is my pleasure indeed, and I'm certainly happy to be on. And this time not as the interviewer, as the interviewee. So it's
Yes.
fun. Certainly looking forward to it, and thanks for the opportunity as well.
Yes, it's always nice to be in the passenger seat sometimes on these interviews.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
while we're giving everyone a couple of minutes to come on in, we want to just go ahead and thank everyone who will share this Facebook Live, who will tag someone. And just a reminder, if you know anyone who is interested in being a part of this conversation, but who is not on Facebook, please keep in mind that this interview is also streaming live on tdnradio.net. So that website again is tdnradio.net, and it will be streaming live on TDN Radio while we're doing the Facebook Live. And of course, you can expect to hear a repeat of this interview on the big station, Q95 FM on Lifeline, Sunday morning, that is Sunday, March 14th, Sunday morning at 10 a.m. with Dr. Thomson Fountain. So let's give everyone a couple of minutes to just get in here. And again, we want to thank you for joining us and for being a part of this conversation. So again, while we're waiting, Dr. Fountain, how is South Sudan? How is the weather? How is life?
Well, it's actually the weather is not dissimilar to what we have in Dominica. As you know, it's in terms of the proximity to the equator. It can get very hot. It can get very hot. We're talking about temperatures in the high 30s, 38, 39, sometimes 40. So it's really, really, really difficult. And now it's the dry season as well. Just like that's back when we have the Kawem that runs from January to May, a similar type of pattern as well. And then the rainy season starts. And this past rainy season was very difficult because there was a lot of rain actually. There was a lot of rain and a lot of flooding. So in addition to
Mhm.
all of the problems the country has, there was also
Right.
this flooding that created a lot of havoc. Yeah, and it took a long time for it to subside.
Yeah, and a number of persons have joined us on the live already, so we're very happy to see that. We have Rosalind out there in New York City, Sabria Senhouse, my sister-in-law, is with us out there in New York as well. So a lot of people are coming in, so we're very excited and we're very happy to see that the numbers are coming in for this very important conversation. So just by way of introduction, Doc, can you tell us about the demographics of South Sudan? Just give us a picture of what the country looks like.
All right. South Sudan is a landlocked country. It has as its neighbors five countries: the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Uganda, Kenya, Sudan, and yeah, there's one more. Yeah, but basically, it is a very big country. It's one of the biggest countries in that region. It used to be a part of Sudan, and it has a very interesting history. In fact, in that South Sudan, the country South Sudan was part of Sudan, the bigger Sudan. So Sudan, it was comprised basically of a northern part that was largely Arab and Muslim, and a southern part that was largely Black and Christian. So they were a country for many, many years. In fact, since the country was formed by the British in the late 18th century. And for about 30, 40 years, the South Sudanese they fought a liberation struggle to separate themselves from the North because they thought ideologically they were not on the same levels. The fact that you had a Muslim country looking over the affairs of a largely Christian country, and also the whole question of racism as well. You know, the different complexion, the people, and so on. So they fought a long struggle, and eventually they got their independence from Sudan in 2011. That's why it's often referred to as the youngest nation. So when they got their independence in 2011, they kept the name of South Sudan, and the northern part of Sudan kept Sudan as a country. So the capital of Sudan is Khartoum, and the capital of South Sudan is Juba. So I'm in South Sudan. I'm in the young country, not in the old country, basically. And population-wise, there are about 13 million people, and 13 million currently. About 4 million outside of Sudan, of South Sudan, in refugee camps. And we'll talk a little bit about why that happened or why that's the case. We have about 4 million that are living right now in camps in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, in Uganda, in Kenya, in Ethiopia. Basically, in all of the neighboring countries, you have refugees that are living there. And within South Sudan itself, you have about 2 million, what we call internally displaced persons, that are persons living in camps, in UN camps within South Sudan. I'll explain a little later the genesis of all of that conflict. Yeah.
Yes, and we're looking forward to those explanations. But before we delve into the details of the peace agreements and all the work that is going on with that, just give us a little reminder of how you journeyed from Dominica to the IMF all the way to Africa. So just a brief history on who Dr. Thomson Fontaine is.
You know, it is very interesting when you think about this. I was at the IMF in up to 2012, and when I was about to leave to go back to Dominica, I decided to go into consultancy. So I signed up with a company called Kofi. It's a British company, just in terms of any potentials for for any kinds of work. And I was in Dominica between 2012 and basically 2017. Never heard anything from them. Then in 2017, I suddenly got an email and says, "Hey, there's an opening for an economist in South Sudan, and if you're interested." I said, "Well, yeah, I could look at it, but I know that this country is a conflict country because they're just emerging from a very vicious civil war." Anyway, they said, "Well, it's for 1 year." There was a peace agreement that was signed in 2015. It ends in 2018, so there's 1 year to go, and it's basically a 1 year project. So I said, okay, that sounds interesting. I will do it. So I got to South Sudan, help them develop a 3-year strategy for the country, and that was my first major task, really, a 3-year strategy. And then out of that, soon after I arrived, though, it was very clear that the peace agreement was not working. And the organization that I was involved with, that I am involved with, the Joint Monitoring and Evaluation Commission, it was set up in 2015 to monitor and evaluate the peace agreement. So let me back up a bit. I think that background is important because I talked about their independence. So South Sudan gets its independence in 2011. All of the South Sudan has 63 different tribes, 63, okay? Mm-hmm. And they speak their own language, they have their own culture, completely different. Anyway, they came together to fight the North. That was the common enemy, the North. They got their independence. So the whole world is excited. That was during the Barack administration, Obama administration. The US poured in just all of the support, and they're really excited about the whole thing. Then in 2013, those that come together to fight the North began to fight each other. So it developed into a civil war, a very vicious civil war, that actually resulted in the deaths of close to 600,000 people. So it was not, it was a very vicious, and I will show some photos in a few minutes of some of the key players in that process. So that war started in 2013. In 2015, the countries in the region, Kenya, Uganda, uh, um, Ethiopia, largely, and Sudan, they came together and they forced them more or less into peace agreement. All right, they got them to sign a peace agreement so that the fighting stopped. So the fighting stops in 2015. Uh, the when the fighting first erupted in 2013, the main opposition leader, and I'll show you some photos of him in a while, Dr. Riek Machar, who is the main opposition leader. At the time, he was the deputy president. So when they got the independence, you had President Salva Kiir, who became the president. He's from the Dinka, what we call the Dinka tribe. And then Dr. Riek Machar, who was the deputy vice president from the Nuer tribe, he was the deputy. So these are the two main protagonists. They're the two main guys who started fighting. So Dr. Machar was forced to leave the country when the war started. So the peace agreement they negotiated for him to come back to South Sudan as the vice president. So they signed the peace agreement. They came back to South Sudan, to Juba, started the unity process. Then in 2016, they fell out again. In 2016, they fell out and they started fighting again. Dr. Riek Machar was forced to leave again, forced to leave Juba. He was almost killed, but eventually he got refuge in South Africa. So in South Africa, so that's 2016, right? So I came in 2017. We realized that the peace agreement was virtually dead. So we decided that we would go for what we call a revitalization. So our organization, what I was doing as the economist, working in that organization, we decided that we would bring the parties together again. Because in the meantime, you had hundreds of different factions, armed factions that had taken root across the country. So we embarked on a very critical process of getting all of the parties together, including the opposition forces. We got all of them together and decided that it was in the best interest of the country to do the peace over, basically do a new process. So in 2017, that started. In June of 2017, the peace process started. We went to Ethiopia, brought again all of the parties together. By that time, all of the new groups that had evolved, the new warring groups and so on, and also got the everybody that was part of it, basically got them in. And then once that happened, we started the process of renegotiating the peace agreement.
And I think that begs this question that what is different now? Because here you had the peace process, the initial agreement back in 2015, and then civil war broke out in 2016. So you had the first peace agreement 2015, followed by a year of war in 2016. So what is different now? What is different that is going to ensure that this 2018 peace agreement will last?
That's a very good question, and I was there from the very start of that process in 2017, from the time we started in Addis, Ethiopia, bringing the parties together. Then we had to get the involvement of Museveni from Uganda, at the time Omar Bashir from Sudan. They actually got involved directly in the peace, brought the parties together. The agreement was signed on the 18th, and then the process of bringing the opposition back, as bear in mind in 2016, again, the vicious war, and again, it is along ethnic lines, it's along tribal lines. So it is very easy to identify a Nuer, very easy to identify a Dinka. because the Dinkas are, people associate Dinkas, they're very tall, generally tend to be very tall and dark, very, very dark skinned. The Nuers are more like my complexion, it's a little shade darker. They're good pass for Caribbean people. So it's very easy to tell the difference in the thing. So all of these Nuers who were in, because the Dinkas had the upper hand in Juba, they fled. They left the country and went outside. Now, one of my critical tasks, and I think that's important to answer your question, but I think it's good for context as well. In the agreement was signed in September. In October, I was given a very important task because by that time, by October of that year, I had now moved. I was no longer the economist, but I was now put in leadership in that organization because the gentleman who had the position I now hold, who was the Mauritius ambassador to the United Kingdom, he decided to go back to his country. So that position became vacant, and I succeeded him in that position. At the time, the chairman of the organization was President Festus Mogae, who was the former president of Botswana. So because the agreement is very specific that the leader of this organization has to be a known African leader of high repute. So he was the leader at the time. Now, in October, 1 month after this, we started the very delicate and difficult process of firstly persuading the opposition that they should come back to Juba. Because remember, we're talking about 2016, just a few months. In fact, when I came in 2017, they were still killing each other. They were still almost on an almost daily basis. You would hear of, killings and so on. The violence continued well into 2017. So when the negotiations started in 2017, we got the first ceasefire agreement in December of 2017. They agreed to lay down their arms then. So that's when a little bit of semblance of peace started to come in. So it's a year later, in October, I now traveled to Khartoum, Sudan, because the way we try to do the process is that the peace would go into 2 phases. There would be a pre-transitional period. Then you would form a unity government. All the former warring parties would come together for a unity government, and then there would be a transitional period to last for 3 years. And at the end of those 3 years, you would have free and fair elections. So that pre-transitional period was to last for 8 months. So my task was to orient the South Sudanese on their roles for those few 8 months. So we selected 10 individuals, 5 from the government, because when the fighting started, a government remained in place. So we had 5 ministers from this government, and then we had 5 opposition from the main parties that signed the agreement. We had 5 individuals. So there were 10 people that were charged to oversee the implementation during that pre-transitional period. 5 government ministers and 5 others. I must say that since then, the 5 others they're now all ministers and they're all working together. But at the time, in October of 2018, I had the very important task of orienting them to what was expected of them and how as the mechanism that was monitoring the peace agreement, what we expected. So I spent 2 full days, and it was a very interesting time because you asked me earlier the question about how my journey, and it was one of those things that really hit you. I was in this room, in this hotel room, just the 11 of us, the 10, 5 government ministers, 5 opposition, their top people, and myself. And I am doing the terms of reference, kind of orient them as to what it is, what we expect, and so on. And I can remember like it was yesterday, the fear that the opposition had. Wow. I remember one of them saying, we are certain that if we come to Juba, we will be killed. Our experiences that we cannot trust this government. They will kill us. And I am trying to convince this guy that no, I think it's different now. People have a different mindset, and I think we can make this thing work. Anyway, long story short, this same guy who was really scared, he's now the Minister of Petroleum. He actually came to Juba in December of last year, of 2018. So by that time, after we did this original orientation, the opposition started coming back in numbers, including Dr. Riek Machar. Dr. Riek Machar, the vice president. He came back in 2019. And that itself was a whole long process because they had a lots of problems. One of the major problems we had was the issue of the number of states. Sudan used to have 10 states. Then when the fighting broke out, the president declared 32 states. So you had a war over whether they should maintain 42 states or whether they should come back to 10 states. All right, and it has all of the implications, the tribal implications that I spoke about, because people saw it as a means of trying, one tribe trying to get the ascendancy over the other and so on. And it took months and months, and that almost derailed the whole process, because as a prerequisite of forming a government, they had to agree on the number of states. And it came down to the wire. In fact, we had to extend the 8 months became 12 months and became 16 months. So it took 16 months for what was supposed to have been 8 months, 16 months. In last year, February 12th, the government was formed, the unity government was formed. And that signaled the start of the transitional period. So all the opposition is back together. They're working together with the government. And this time, I think things are moving nicely. We've not seen any return so far to fighting.
And I think that is wonderful that that is one item on the agenda that can be checked off. But I know there are 6 areas that your agency covers. So one of them is the unity government, which you just explained has already been put in place to assist with this process. But there are several other areas that will be covered as part of that agreement. So can you give us an update on some of the other 6 areas that is part of the process of regaining peace in South Sudan? And again, we thank everyone who's joining us on the Facebook Live and who's listening to us via tdnradio.net right now. And again, we are here with Dr. Thomson Fountain, and he's giving us an update on the peace agreement, the 2018 peace agreement in South Sudan. So Doc, just kind of walk us through the status of the other 5 parts of the peace agreement, if you would.
Okay, so the peace agreement comprised of what we call chapters. So it's not just the security aspect or the governance aspect. You have basically 7 chapters. The 7th chapter is my organization, but you have the six chapters. The first one is governance, that deals with the setup. So for example, right now, in order to get everybody in an all-inclusive government, we had to agree to 4 vice presidents. So there are 4, the only country in the world I think that has 4 vice presidents. There's
4 vice presidents.
4 vice presidents, and a cabinet of 35. The only country I think that rivals South Sudan is Dominica in terms of the size.
I was thinking the same thing.
In terms of the size of cabinet, right? So you had that in chapter 1. Then chapter 2 deals with the security situation, because very much, as I told you, you have people who are fighting each other, who killed each other's brothers, cousins, sisters, and so on. Now, chapter 2 focuses on bringing them together. Chapter 2 have several things about, for example, you had to have the whole issue of they had to declare all prisoners of war. They had to agree not to have child soldiers. They had to agree to open up access for the country for humanitarian. So all of that is in chapter 2. And in addition, you had a number of security mechanisms that were formed. A key one was to get all of the leadership, the what we call the chief of defense forces for each of the militaries, because you had the government had its military, the opposition, 2 major groups had their own military. So now you have the leaders of each of these 3 coming together, along with the head of the police, the head of the prison services, all of the security mechanisms. They form an organization that reports to us. All right, so this organization reports to us, but the whole focus was on the security issues. One of the main things they had to accomplish was a unified military and a unified, what we call unified organized forces. So now they had to come together and allow opposition military to come, and that's the pictures I will show later, where we went to those training centers, bring them together, the period of training, they bring them together as a unified military, unified police, unified prison services, unified fire services, and so on. So that's a key aspect of chapter 2. Chapter 3 deals with the humanitarian issue. I said earlier that there were 4 million refugees because of the fighting who had fled to neighboring countries and 2 million internally dispersed. Chapter 3 deals with how you bring these people back to the country, or you provide for them to allow them to come back in peace and safety. That's chapter 3. Chapter 4 is an economic chapter and that's when I first went the first time. That's what I was looking after. It deals with the economy, reforms, because one of the main reasons why this civil war broke out is because South Sudan has oil, and a lot of the fight was over this natural resource. So you have reforms that deals about accountability, transparency, and so on, and a lot of different reforms within the economic sector. That's chapter 4. Chapter 5 deals with, very importantly, transitional justice issues, because a lot of atrocities were committed during these years of civil war. So you have to bring people to account. So there is an allowance for what is called a hybrid court that would try persons who are guilty of human rights abuses. Then you also have a truth and reconciliation committee that would be formed, a commission that would allow people to seek forgiveness, something along the lines of what they did in South Africa after apartheid. Because, as I said, a lot of atrocities were committed, people hold a lot of grudges and so on. So you want to organize that in such a way that people can have truth and reconciliation. And then the third part is to have a reparations aspect so that people who were wronged can receive some just reward. That is chapter 5. And then chapter 6 deals with a permanent constitution making process. So they have to redo the entire constitution for the country to be more inclusive and so on. So these are the 6 chapters that are currently being worked on. All of this has to be done. We have 3 years to get this done. We've already done 1 year and 2 more to go.
And that kind of begs the question, because as we know, a lot of the civil war that broke out was along tribal lines, where, cattle is seen as very high esteem in South Sudan. And unfortunately, sometimes one tribe has to trespass on another tribe's property in order to be able to graze their cattle, and people have gotten killed out of that. So does any of the chapters address that particular issue to ensure that another civil war is not going to break out over the rights of grazing your cattle?
I will tell you, that's the one that probably I've had the most sleepless nights over, is what you just described. It is very interesting because specifically it is not related to the agreement, because that has been happening for centuries, hundreds and hundreds of years. You have one tribe will go raid cattle, not only cattle, but children. There's a particular tribe that will raid the women and children of one tribe. And then after about 6 months, that tribe will retaliate, and that just tit for tat, that goes on. In fact, for this year alone already, we have several hundreds been killed. Now, this is not part of the agreement per se, because it was considered to be a community type thing. What we saw happening, what we spoke out against lately, was that it now got a national significance. In other words, it appeared as if politicians were using that as a proxy war. Yeah. So we constantly have to be talking about it. We constantly have to be urging the parties to refrain from getting involved, because it's along tribal lines, as you said. And remember, the civil war was along tribal lines. So it's very easy. There can be a blurred line between the two. But that is something that continues, sadly, and a lot of people already, and it happens in particular during the dry season when they have to fetch water for their cattle. Then you have a lot of cattle raiding, but in addition to that, you have the theft of children as well. It's a big issue that keeps us, up and worried, because since the peace agreement was signed, we've not had a fighting between the same type of fighting as we had in 2016 and 2013, thankfully. But you still have a lot of that happening.
Yeah, certainly. And so unfortunate that, here you have a country that fought for 50 years to gain its independence, yet there's still war within the tribes of the country. So that is certainly unfortunate to hear. And hopefully it can be addressed at another level so that does not cause another civil war to break out. Now, let's talk about the regional involvement in this whole peace process. So you're from Dominica, so you're clearly not from the region, but we have the importance, the head of the organization that you work with is actually from Kenya. The second in line is from Ethiopia. So
Yeah.
let's just kind of talk about the regional involvement to secure this peace agreement.
Yes, so it is a regional effort. And one of the things that you should note as well, in fact, the current president, President Salva Kiir, he came very close to being defeated in 2016. But the Museveni of Uganda actually sent troops. He actually helped back them up with troops that came in physically into South Sudan to help them and then to defeat the opposition. So he's a huge player in this. But each of the presidents of the region, it's what we call it's a regional peace, because the South Sudan is part of what they call the IGAD countries, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, which comprise the six countries I spoke about: Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, Sudan, Djibouti, and South Sudan. These six countries, they have an alliance. And so all of these countries, in the interest of regional peace, they came together. And as you remember, the current head of the organization that I work for he was the former head of the Kenyan military. So he's a military man. The deputy, the chief of staff, is the Ethiopian former ambassador to Russia and to the United Kingdom. And then there is me from Dominica, right? So, but we have within the organization that, and I supervise now the staff from basically all over, not just the region. We have staff from Kenya, from Uganda, from Ethiopia, but we also have from the UK and the US that work with us. We have from Switzerland as well that work in our organization. So it is multifaceted, but the onus is on that regional organization to really ensure that the peace prevails in South Sudan. So we report, so my organization reports to that body. We call this the summit, it's called the EGAD Summit. So we monitor and evaluate the peace agreement, and then we report to them for corrective action. If there needs to be any action that has to be taken, we report to them.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you for sharing that. And of course, congratulations on the important work that you're doing. And we're so proud to call you Dominican.
Well, it it goes to show. I mean, if you'd asked me whether I'd be doing something like that 4 years ago, I would say no. I mean, how do you even get there? But
Yeah, and I have to tell you because that's one of the thoughts that came to my mind when I was thinking of speaking to you. I just thought of you as this young man growing up in Grand Fort, the parents, with parents who were farmers. And I was thinking to myself, yes, you had lofty goals for your life, but did you see yourself in this capacity? Did your
no,
imagination extend all the way to Africa?
not in my wildest dreams. I mean, when I was at the IMF, I worked in Africa, but not on that level. I mean, the work I do now is of such critical importance. I mean, I'll show you, for example, some of the newspaper. I took a quick thing of that to show you. Uh, I speak on a very regular basis to the people of South Sudan because the question remains is the peace holding? Is the peace sustainable? Are our lives changing? And we constantly have to be addressing those issues with the public. So it is very, very important in terms of the just the fact that this organization that has such a critical role, because what we have been trying to do, and as I talked about the 6 chapters of the agreement, you have to literally remind them that they signed on and they have to do those things. It is very easy when people get into positions, they're okay, they can fold their hands and forget everything else. But the fact of the matter is, you still have millions of people in refugee camps who needs to come home. You still have to look for an election in 2 years' time, literally in 2 years' time. Supposed to put everything in place to have an election that is considered free and fair. And not only do we report to IGAD, but we also report directly to the UN Security Council and the African Union Peace and Security, because it is also a question of international peace as well. Because if there is fighting and discord in that central part of Africa, it impacts the entire region.
Absolutely.
So the UN has a very specific interest in it. So we report directly to the UN Peace and Security Council and to the UN Security General as well. On a quarterly basis, we have to report. We prepare reports that are submitted to him, and that is how people basically keep track of what's going on there in South Sudan.
Yeah, and Doc, it begs the question, what's going to happen when the monitoring body has picked up and left? What is your hope for what will happen once JAMAC is no longer in the picture? What will keep this agreement in place?
Well, the agreement life supposed to expire with the elections. So the hope is that by the time elections takes place, they would already have had the appetite for working together. In fact, all of the leaders, when you talk to them today, they say they no longer have what they want is the agreement to hold. They want peace to prevail. So I think there is that overriding feeling that we are tired of, what are we fighting for? Why are we killing each other? These are our own people. So the idea is that by the time the elections takes place in 2 years, that the country will be sufficiently united that whichever government assumes office will be able to run the country in a peaceful manner. So at least that's the hope.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we want to acknowledge everyone who's joining us on Facebook Live right now. And we also want to say a special good evening if you're listening to us on tdnradio.net. So again, don't forget, if you are on Facebook Live and you know anyone who would be interested in hearing this conversation, please let them know that we're streaming live on tdnradio.net. And you can also hear a playback of this interview on the big station Q95 on Sunday morning, 10 a.m. on Lifeline with Dr. Fountain. So let's just acknowledge some of the folks who are joining us here on Facebook Live. We have Chris Bugunu is with us, Oswald Williams, Victor, we have Sharon, we have Augustina, Julia, we have Mr. Gordon Henderson who says great Dominican, and then we have Norma Fontaine who gives us Proverbs 18:16. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here on this Facebook Live. Now, Thomson, you have some pictures that you would like to share with us, and just kind of tell us any significant experiences that stand out for you during all of this.
I can tell you. So what I will do, I will relay I will first of all, let me do this first. Let me play you some video. I have some videos lined up. I'll play this, including a very short piece from Al Jazeera, and it will kind of set the stage, and I will kind of talk through it as well. And then I have some still photographs that I can also speak to kind of give our viewers a sense as to the scale of what we are talking about.
Yes,
so
and of course, and of course, we will also post some of the videos and the images on my website, pushpast10, PUSH, the number 10, for again, taking into consideration that not everyone is on Facebook. So again, you will be able to see the videos and the pictures on PUSH, the number 10.com. Hopefully by this evening, we have a couple of the videos up already, but as soon as you send me the rest, Thomson, I'll be more than happy to post them as well.
Excellent. So I'm going to share my screen with the video. I hope everything works out. I tried it earlier, so we never know with these things. So let's see. Tell me if you see.
Fingers crossed. Okay? Thomson Fountain. Oh, yes. Oh, look at that imagery. So tell us what we're looking at.
Yes. Okay. So this, I talked earlier about the fact that one of the key things that we're trying to do in chapter 2 was to bring all of the forces together, the government forces with the opposition forces. And that is part of the training that is taking place. And that's one of the places that I was able to visit It is some distance from Juba, but just to see exactly what was going on. So that is some footage that I took. It's just a few seconds long. I'm going to roll it so you can get a sense. I mean, literally thousands of troops there, as you will see from this video. Noise is just the wind that you're hearing, but basically it shows you the number of people that are there, hoping to become part of this unified military. There's no song, and then you're going to see in the end there. Um, these are He's obviously not South Sudanese, but here you have American military, you have the UN as well. I should also add that, in South Sudan currently, you have a United Nations mission that has upwards of 15,000 people, including at least 8,000 troops from several countries, from Pakistan, from India, from Britain. You have a huge peacekeeping mission currently in South Sudan as well as part of the effort. So that's the first one. I have to stop it and go back. I could not find an easier way of doing it, but I'll show you.
Yeah, I know. That's usually the case with the sharing the screen. You have to get out and then come back in.
Yes. So this one, the one I showed you previously was the organized forces. This one is basically military. And these individuals, they were to form part of what we call the VIP forces. They were supposed to provide protection in particular, for the opposition forces coming back, or the opposition politicians coming back into South Sudan. So that gives you a sense. There were about 3,000 of them there from both. In here, you have both government and opposition forces.
We shall only know you by one name. You will not be having your factions and no more. You are one national force, and that's what is expected of you. And that is the essence of this unification. This training that was done here was an orientation because we know you all already have a military background.
Okay, so this one showed the, as I said, this is the military part of it. I have two other short ones for you.
And then before you do, Doc, just kind of tell us, is the groups that you're showing us, are they comprised of various tribes, of the 63 tribes in South Sudan? So that might be an opportunity to allow people to see how much similar we are as opposed to how much different we are.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely. You have all of the tribes represented there. But as I said, the two largest tribes are the Dinkas and the Nuers, but you have several others. You have the Zande, you have the Kokea, you have just names that I can't even keep in my mind. But,
I mean, 63 is a lot to try to remember.
It's a lot, but what we've also done as well is that we've translated, our organization, we have translated the peace agreement into 7 of the major languages. So although you have all different tribes, but there are 7 core languages that at least one person would be able to speak. So we've translated into those 7 languages. And of course, Arabic is widely spoken, but it used to be ruled by an Arabic, arrangement. So that's also part of it. All right, now this one, I'm moving away. I want to show you what the peace means. This particular one I'm going to show, in fact, I posted that on Facebook and got quite a lot of, I was surprised at the response, but what this is, it shows the, what peace means to the people of South Sudan. I mean, imagine that you spent, the last 5-6 years, conflict and so on, and then what they're sensing, they're beginning to feel the whole idea that peace is coming. And I traveled just last month to another part of the country with the defense minister to see one of those camps that I showed you earlier. And that reception was for her. It was not for me. I just want people to know that. It was for the Minister of Defense, who, by the way, I'll show you a picture of her in a while. I'll show you a picture of Thomas together. She's the wife of the current first vice president, the one I said was the main, what do you call it, principal. Is the first vice president and the president, Riek Machar. Most people know him by his very famous hat, cowboy hat. He does not do without it. So she's his wife, and she's the defense minister. So we travel with her with the support of the UN. The UN provides a lot of good support to us. I should also add as well that as part of our organization, we also have a military part of the organization, and their task is to monitor the ceasefire on the ground, because the parties signed the peace agreement, so they have to monitor it. So you have a multilateral force that you have that goes into all of the different areas to make sure that the parties are not adhering, that they've withdrawn from conflict areas, that they're not occupying civilian centers and so on, and they're not committing any type of atrocity. So that, and they report directly to us. So I'm going to show you now a little bit of this. A very interesting celebration that took place, which was surprisingly quite strong. No, I don't know if you noticed in this that there is a building, a huge building that is gutted, that is from the effects of the war, completely destroyed and so on.
That particular video I've already posted on my website, so everyone can take a look at it.
All right, and then there is one.
So that's what peace looks like and feels like.
Right. Yes, it is. That's the when you can see the building. Right.
That is talent right there.
You see, and that is what in a way drives me, because when you see that, when you see just the tremendous, what it means to them. And then I want to let me just bring you the Al Jazeera piece, and then we'll look at some still photo. But it's amazing, what when they begin to express themselves like this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, we have a very captive audience. They're listening intently, but please keep in mind, if you have any questions for Dr. Thomson Fontaine, you can go ahead and ask them. And thank you for not asking questions during the presentation. But if you have anything that you would like to ask in particular, please feel free to ask at this time.
All right, so let me see if I can bring up the Al Jazeera piece. Now, this is from Al Jazeera, and they actually I was interviewed for this particular one because I was out in the training area and I was talking and listen. I want you to listen carefully. I can talk a little bit about some of what I was speaking about at the time. But let me start it from the very beginning.
A call to line up for military exercises is something these soldiers are used to. But for the past 2 months, these South Sudanese troops have been training alongside other armed groups, some of whom they once fought on the battlefield during South Sudan's civil war.
They're all here. We gathered them. They are now unified. There's no different now. There's no IO, there's no SSPDF, and there's no SAWA.
Some of these fighters gathered here are part of the government forces. Others come from the main armed opposition called the Sudan People's Liberation Movement in Opposition, and a few from the armed group known as South Sudan's Opposition Alliance. This is one of the 16 such camps around the country where the fighters are trained to form a unified national army. It was set up after a 2018 peace deal to end the 5-year-long conflict that's killed nearly 400,000 people and displaced a third of the country's 12 million population. The deal states that 41,500 out of the 83,000 forces from the warring sides are to be trained before the formation of a transitional government. That government was partially formed last weekend when 5 vice presidents were sworn in. This training camp in the west of South Sudan holds about 1,500 soldiers from the 3 different sides, but they're not in equal numbers, even though they're supposed to be. The opposition says transporting soldiers from their areas to the camps is difficult, and that's just one of the many issues affecting the training and reunification of the forces. Soldiers say the camp lacks many basic needs, making life inside hard.
There is no medicine, and we sleep in the open where it's cold, and the needs for female soldiers are not met.
There is no water sometimes, and there is no place to sleep. And we train in our slippers and sometimes barefoot, which is hard, and we don't have uniforms.
The Joint Monitoring and Evaluation Commission, JMEC, the body tasked with monitoring the implementation of the deal, has reported that since the training sites were established, hundreds of soldiers have abandoned them due to poor conditions. Shortage of funds is another big challenge.
The government made a pledge of $100 million, which we felt would be sufficient to do this initial training. Unfortunately, not all of those resources have come from the government. We've received about 60 million of which of the $100 million. So we continue to encourage the government to make available those remaining funds so that we can really see an improvement in those conditions within those training centers.
A well-trained and disciplined army is crucial for South Sudan's transitional period and to avoid a return to war. Soldiers here say they want to be part of a united army, but how soon that happens depends on those leading them and the country. Hiba Morgan, Al Jazeera, Meridi, South Sudan.
All right, so this was the piece from Al Jazeera and certain critical things that she mentioned then. And one of it is that the unification of the military we see as key. Because one of the things, what we did is that we studied the reasons why the first agreement failed. And one of the things we found out was that in the first agreement, after the fighting broke out in 2013, they signed an agreement in 2015, and they were still allowed.
I think your video might still be on YouTube. Check that.
Okay, I was wondering what was causing your
technology for you.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, check.
Yeah, so that was all me. Yeah, so all right. So now that I can't seem to get out. Okay, let's see this. All right, so I'm trying to come back to. Okay, great. All right, so good. So one of the issues was that they allowed the military, the armed people to retain their commanders in chief. So you had in Juba, you had different militaries having allegiance to different individuals. So you have, for example, President Salva Kiir had his own military that were loyal to him. Riek Machar had his own. So it was very easy in 2016 when they had a disagreement for them to go at each other. The militaries went at each other because their allegiance was not to the country, but to the individuals. So one of the things that we said that would be different in this 2018 agreement is for there to be a unified army, unified in the sense that their allegiance is not to one person, but to the country. And that's why so much effort is being placed. And I was talking there at the time, the appeal was to the government to make available the resources, because you have people in the camp, as I said, they're in camp, training in sleepers, without the proper uniforms, no food. I mean, it is heartbreaking. You go out there in those camps and you see people sleeping out in the open. They don't, no tents. We made a really good effort to get. We got the Chinese, the Egyptians, and so on to give tents and food and so on. But when you're trying to get 86,000, the number that we targeted in the first phase was 86,000 military and police and so on to get trained. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of food. That's a lot of uniform. That's a lot of logistics that has to go with it. So, and then I was talking there about the need to have a lot more of those resources made available to them, because you saw the conditions. You saw what they were eating. For most of them, that's the daily meal for day in, day out. Just a couple of weeks ago, we were just very close to Juba, to one of those centers, and they brought us to the warehouse, and it was practically empty, no food in there. So, increasingly what you have is that those people who came in to become part of the National Army, they now have to go out and get food. They now have to go out and take care of their families. So that is posing a real concern for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that. And of course, I'm just going to read out a couple of messages, and you can decide which you would like to entertain at this point. So Herbie Jack says, Dr. Fontaine, any insights on how the economic situation in Dominica can be alleviated? Chris says, I'm in total awe,
In
speechless.
Dominica or in South Sudan? He says
Dominica. So that's why I said you can choose the questions that you can address at this point. And Dorothy said you made history. That's the kind of exposure we want for Dominica. Norma said, Dr. Fountain, this is very enlightening. You understand why. And then Chris also says that South Sudan lack agricultural land.
No, actually, far from it. Far from it. One of the things that I identified when I was looking at the economy, one of the things I identified, one of the main things they can do is agriculture. They have some of the best lands. I mean, I went to a part more or less in the south part there, and they have the best pumpkins. You can eat that. It is sweet, it is sour, it is, the pumpkins and the yams and the fruit, and I mean, they have some of the best agricultural lands anywhere in Africa, and they have it by the tens of thousands of acres. And what we're trying to do is to bring a focus on agriculture, because we believe that if they can actually, get agriculture going, can make a huge difference.
Absolutely.
And then to depend on the oil, but in addition to oil, they also have other they have gold. They have a huge industry in mahogany and so on, wood. But agriculture would be a big thing for them. The Dominican one is very easy. We need to get rid of scarlet. I mean, that's an easy one to answer. And then we can see that as long as scarlet is there, the country's not going to go anywhere. And I think that is how I would answer that. But I wanted to show something to talk about in addition to what we spoke about. Give you some other indication. I have some still photos that I want to talk to, which kind of sheds a little bit more light on what we are up against and what we're trying to do here in South Sudan. Is there anything that I missed? I was trying to write, but my pen unfortunately stopped writing.
No, you did just fine.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to show you. Can you see this? Is it already showing?
No, not yet.
Okay. So I need to do something different then. Let's do this. Yeah, okay. It should be coming up. All right. All right. So I'm going to show some of the still photos.
Now,
This
is
one,
that the houses? Is that people's homes, the thatched roofs?
yes, you have a lot of these out in the rural areas. I mean, around the city, around the bigger cities, you have regular buildings, brick buildings, but that is the house of choice, mainly because it is so hot. And these are really good. They keep you cool and people and they're affordable because you can actually harvest it from the surrounding bushes and people live and build and live in those. Um, so that's one. That is some of the soldiers that we met recently again, um, waiting because the focus, what we're trying to do now is to get them to be graduated and deployed across the country so that they can improve the level of security. Uh, this gentleman that I'm with there, this is what we call the force commander for the United Nations. He is a three-star general from India who heads that mission, and we traveled together to different sites. So that was one of our stops, the UN stop, and we were just discussing some of the issues around the training center. So we work very closely with UNMISS, the United Nations. In fact, in this coming week, I'll be traveling with them to do an orientation for one of the states. All right, we talk about the 10 states. They have just formed state governments. That was just completed about 2 weeks ago. So now in the individual states, the government, the assemblies and so on are now starting to become functional. So we'll be doing that. So that is with him. That's just another picture of him. That's how we normally travel around the country because most of the roads on path, I think South Sudan has the least amount of paved roads in the entire world in terms of for the size of the country. And most of the roads, and when it rains, it becomes impassable. So typically we travel either with the UN or with the same group I talked about that's part of our organization that does the monitoring. They also have their own set of helicopters that we usually travel with on as well. So that was meeting with some of the commanders, getting information about what is going on in the camps and so on, and getting, because what we do, our task, since we are monitoring the equipment, we need to know exactly what is going right, what is not working, what problems they have, and then if we then formulate that into our reports that we can then take to the government, or in that case to IGAD, to see how we can get support, for the process. So that's part of that. Yeah, that's more of the same, just doing this.
And I think what will be helpful, Doc, is I will actually just, if you send me the video presentation of the Facebook Live, I'll just go ahead and upload the entire thing to pushpast10.com. So everyone who's not on Facebook will have the complete experience. So once you send me the video, everyone can look forward to seeing the entire video on pushpast10.com.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that would be the best thing to do.
Yes, certainly. So this is a discussion that we are having with the assembly, the parliament. I was kind of giving them some information as to what the agreement is about, the challenges and so on. So, and then the person to my left is the deputy I was talking about, who is a former Ethiopian ambassador to the UK and to Russia. And the one to my right is the one whom I replaced. He's the one, the former ambassador from Mauritius. Yeah. So that's that. But that was when we were out in the field, just taking some shots of that. Have some more video again, just kind of, oriented and seeing these guys in the hot sun Just
I'm telling you, I'm telling you.
it's
Yeah.
a lot closer to the equator here than it is back
Absolutely.
home. It's hard. Yeah. All right. This is a very interesting picture. So this is I talked earlier about the first vice president who was exiled in South Africa. That's him there. And then in the middle is the Minister of Defense. That is why, Minister of Defense. So that's the three of us. We meet very, very regularly because as the principals to the agreement, we're constantly in discussion. So we are constantly meeting with them. So that was one of the photos that I took with the two of them. Then here I do what we do. We sometimes do outreach for the press, for different groups and so on about what the peace agreement is, the way it is structured, because we have a lot of outreach because not everybody understands the agreement and so on. So I was doing one of my sessions there, trying to explain exactly what the government is composed of, how here on that slide it shows the different parties to the agreement, the main political parties that are part of this agreement. Okay. And then I have, well, where is it? Okay, I think I did not start at the beginning. There is one I believe I have with the president I wanted to show. Yeah, so that's another very recent one that we did, right? That's the one there. So here is the current head of the organization in the middle, and then to his right is the president of South Sudan. That was the one
With his cowboy hat, like you mentioned.
Yes. So we meet with them as a key part to the agreement. We're constantly in discussion, and because so much rests on this agreement, I can't begin to tell you how critical it is for this thing.
For the region.
Yeah. Now this picture, this is one of we talked about the first vice president, so it's really 5 vice presidents in all. Madam Rebecca Garang is one of those vice presidents. She has a very important role in that she is the widow of the first president of South Sudan, the one who is considered to be the one who led the struggle, the one who spearheaded the effort to gain independence from Sudan, John Garang. So those of you that follow history would have heard of him. And he was going to be the president of South Sudan, because he was the leader of the resistance. This is his widow. He died in 2009. He was traveling by helicopter from Uganda back to South Sudan, and his helicopter crashed.
Oh, unfortunate.
Yeah, so he died just 2 years before the country got independence. So his wife is very highly revered here in South Sudan because he was the most popular person. Everybody loved him. He was a PhD, brilliant man. He was also a member of at the time the Brother Sudan. At one time he was also a minister there in that government. So before they got independence, they had given them some kind of their own self-rule to kind of gain their footing. So he was put in charge of South Sudan. Sadly, he died, unfortunately, but that's his widow, Madam Rebecca Garang. Yeah.
Yes, and thank you for the insight, Doc. Thank you for the insight on the peace agreement in South Sudan. Now, you've been at this since 2017. Can you just tell us some of the moments that you're most proud of, and what are some of the concerns that you still have with this entire peace agreement? So first, what are you most proud of? And second, what are you still very concerned about?
I think when I think about it, I think probably the thing that I'm most happy about is part of that group that recommended to the chair that we needed to do something about this agreement. Because it took a lot of doing. We had to first of all persuade him that it was necessary, and once we did, he then had to go out to the region to convince the region that we need to bring the parties together. I think that stands out. That is one. And of course, during the course of the negotiations itself, there were several moments. But I believe that, and what I mentioned, I talked about earlier, having to really, tutor, as it were, really brief and to think through, just a matter of putting together the terms of reference, thinking through what do we expect, what should the people of South Sudan expect from you. And I remember at the end, actually, a very interesting story, which I tell that story practically everywhere I go in South Sudan, because I think it allows people to see how far we've come, all right, how far the processes have come. I remember, and that moment stands out quite a bit, because it also reminds me a lot of Dominica in a kind of an interesting way, to the extent that the issues we have in Dominica is nothing. I mean, the worst you will probably do is to have somebody in the opposition, in workers or labor and so on, will give you some midway and so on. That's probably the most we have, right? But you're talking about people who lost loved ones, people who killed and so on. So I remember at the end of the first day of that workshop that we had in Khartoum, when we first started, the government side, the 5 ministers were sitting, 5 on to my left, and then you had the 5 opposition members on the right. At the end of the first day, one of the ministers, a woman from the government side, she says, why are we behaving as if we're still fighting or we're still negotiating? The negotiations are over. We have a peace agreement. It's up for us to make it work. Why don't you come and sit next to me?
Oh, beautiful.
And that was that broke the ice in a way that was spectacular, because they then moved, they kind of merged. So, a couple of them came over, and now they were just, that was it. That is what we need to see. That is what we are. And I saw that, and then that gave me a lot of hope then. Because up to that point, I can tell you, we were still very concerned. I mean, there were questions as to whether Riek Machar would even come back. And there were questions as to whether the opposition members who had seen and had lost so much, whether they would come back to South Sudan. And I told you about the fear for their life was a real issue, because when they were there in 2016, they were followed, they were killed, they were harassed, So it was a question of, and then when that happened, it sent a very strong signal, and it went a long way, I believe, to helping, kind of plaster over all of the hurt, all of the pain, all of the differences that they had. And these are the moments that stand out for me. That and I think finally for me is what I see on the face of the people, of the ordinary person. Like when we go out to the regions and we talk to people about the peace, some of them have never read the agreement, some of them don't know what's in the agreement. But it's when we actually meet with them and you see the expression on their faces. I remember one time I was doing a presentation to about 120 clergy. We had both the Muslim and the religious, the Catholic and Anglican and Protestant leaders together. They had come from all over, and we brought them to one place. So kind of the whole idea was we would explain to them what the agreement is, and then they could then go back to their church services, whether it's in the mosque or wherever they go to church, and explain to the people. And I remember just the gratitude that these people had, for what was happening in the country, because they had seen the violence, they had seen the suffering. I mean, you go to some of these places and you can still see the buildings have been ripped apart, burned to the ground. There are still visible signs of the fighting there, and they were so happy to see that at least there is hope. And I think that is what, more than anything else, really keeps me going and keeps me hopeful that in 2 years we've not seen renewed fighting, and the parties they're here in Juba, they're talking to each other. Even when they don't talk to each other, we will talk to them, then we'll talk to the other, and we'll relate each other's, So there's every reason to be hopeful. Every reason to be hopeful.
Yes, wonderful, wonderful. So again, thank you for the update. And to just kind of end on a light note, many of us will never travel to Africa and experience Africa the way you have. So have you had any opportunity to enjoy any part of South Sudan that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, well, the thing, South Sudan is still a country that is what would I say? It's still a conflict country and still a conflict zone. But I can tell you, I enjoyed when I went to that particular place. It's called Yambio, and we had this. It reminded me of home so much because I got a plate of provision. You know, you had the yam, the tanya, they have the dry pear, the dry zabuka, and I open my eyes and I'm in Dominica. That's a Dominica plate, So it is these small things I think, and then it gives you hope as well, and then also one of the things I believe that it has kind of changed to me in a lot of ways is just to kind of feel and understand, the human condition, why it is that people kill each other, why is it that people hate each other, why it is that people, they find it so difficult to live together with each other, and that's why sometimes and to bring it home, to bring it to Dominica, I worry sometimes about Dominica because I see how we've drifted from this camaraderie, from this fellowship, from this caring, whether we're on different sides, because we create our own tribes. And the problem really is the tribal issue, because the tribes, they unite together. They're at one. The conflict they find is with other tribes. So what we've done in Dominica is that we've created this red tribe, this blue tribe, this green tribe, and we're using that to not see the other person as a Dominican, but to see that person as an enemy, to see that you're better red than dead, so that you can benefit from the state because your party is not in office, and I think a lot about this. I think a lot about this human condition that even on a smaller scale, I think of the willingness, for example, of the Prime Minister to bring foreign troops into Dominica to shoot his own people in the name of politics. And I think about this, and I think about, I mean, when you think of what happened in Salisbury, our own police officers prepared to shoot their people over politics, and some of these things is hard to understand. It is hard for me to make sense of it, because you would think that the easy way, the best way is to try to resolve our differences, to understand that we're all created not necessarily equally, most likely differently, but to be able to, mend our differences, and so, but you don't have that, and being in South Sudan has allowed me time to think very much about our condition in Dominica and what has happened in the political scene in Dominica, and just really, I mean, it's not on a level, as I said, it's not on a level that we see here in South Sudan, certainly. But it's the same kinds of things that drives it, the same kinds of concerns, I believe, that drives all of that. Yeah. You're still here, right?
I think we had a little bit of a hiccup.
All right.
But I think that we are back. Can you hear me, Thomson?
Loud and clear. Yeah.
Yes, perfect. So we had a little bit of a hiccup, but it's just fine right now. So I was just thanking everyone who joined us today, and thank them for sharing the live. thank them if you joined us through TDN Radio, and of course, everyone who will listen to this program on the big station Q95 in the morning. And of course, we will be posting the video to Push Past 10, PUSHPAST, the number 10, for those of you who were not able to see the images that Dr. Fontaine was describing. So do you have any final words for us, Doc, as we get ready to wrap up this very important program?
Yes, certainly. I just wanted to thank all of those who are listening. I know a number of persons showed up, and I really want to thank a lot of people for a lot of support. It's not always easy being so far away from home and under very sometimes difficult circumstances. I mean, we have a night curfew because the place is still not as secure. So, you know, from 7:30 every day, you have to be indoors by 7:30. It's not always easy, but when I think of how just being present, and when I think the feedback that I get from the average South Sudanese who says, without the involvement of an organization like yours, without the involvement of the region, we would kill each other. We would be gone. We would be, you know, it would be asunder. But there is hope. You know, that makes it worthwhile. You know, that makes it worthwhile. You saw the joy of these young people that I showed the video. You know, it really humbles me in a way that I think it's you know, and I thank God, you know, for the opportunity. I try to do something in Dominica, but you know, 60,000 people as against 12 million. I'll probably take the 12 million every day. But yeah, I mean, I'm saying that in jest. You know, my heart is still with Dominica, and you know, I'm still this guy from Granford. That's what defines me. Yeah, so in a way, it's been humbling. It's been, you know, being able to be up there and to have people rely on your word, to have people depend on your judgment, to have people depend on your advice, to be able to speak, whether it's to the president of Uganda or to Kenya, and then to have them listen to you. And you know, it is something. It is because these are presidents of millions of people. I mean, Kenya has 40 million people. Uganda has 40 million people. You know, so you know, it helps put things in perspective for me, and to be humbled by the experience, and just to be able to contribute to humanity. I think ultimately that's the great thing, to be able to contribute to humanity. And then to see people's lives improved, I think is really what it's all about.
Yes, well, thank you for the important work that you're doing, and we are very proud of you. We have a number of folks on the live who are just talking about how very proud that they are of the work that you're doing. So thank you for taking a couple of minutes out of your busy schedule just to update us on the peace agreement in South Sudan, and we look forward to hearing a lot more about the process and just how everything is going. So again, thank you for being here. My name again is Simone Matthew, and it was a pleasure having this conversation with you, Dr. Thomson Fountain.
Thank you so much, Simone. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Yes, you have yourself a good day.
Thank you, and thanks to all of you viewing us. Thank you so much for joining. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, thank you.
Bye-bye.